He's very much like a Duracell bunny.
He's bursting with so much energy. He doesn't know when to stop. He could ruin a day, or he could make a day.
I get really angry and stuff and shout. And then after that, I just say to myself, like, why did I do it? Like.
And he'd fight me 90% of the time.
You can't control yourself when you're angry. It's like a ghost just comes inside you and takes over your body to get you mad. It's just when sometimes when I get really angry, I just box my mommy. Sometimes I take deep breaths. They calm me down.
It makes you go off the head too easy. Just makes you mad hyper.
In school on Friday, I got sent to time out 5 times. I wasn't listening to the teacher. I just want to be good for the whole day. That's all.
Tonight's prime time looks at ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a condition which can make people inattentive, hyperactive, and highly impulsive. An increasing number of children with these symptoms of ADHD are presenting to mental health services.
If you look within the group of 5 to 9-year-olds, 50% of the boys who are attending the services suffer from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Many children with the condition are primarily inattentive and do not have conduct problems. But up to half of children diagnosed with ADHD have more than one disorder, and they often have associated behavioural difficulties. These children are the focus of our programme.
ADHD can often have coexisting conditions. That might be conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder in some cases. So behaviour that you're seeing isn't actually ADHD, it's something quite distinct.
In extreme cases, families frequently feel alone and unsupported.
You're battling at home with the child, you're battling at the school, and you're battling for services. It can be just so soul-destroying.
We'll hear too from skeptics who question whether ADHD really exists.
It's what I call the McDonaldization of children's mental health, in that we're trying to dumb down something that is multifaceted into a simple label.
And we'll hear from scientists in Dublin who are behind some of the latest research claiming to show that ADHD really is a genuine brain disorder. In extreme cases, this is what can happen when childhood ADHD has not been successfully addressed.
If you're born with ADHD, life is going to be a struggle. It's very difficult to succeed, but I think it's important to recognize it's not impossible.
ADHD is not the problem. It's untreated ADHD that is the problem.
From the time he wakes up in the morning, he's always been hyperactive. He loves swimming, and even an hour session in a swimming pool, and then give him a half an hour, and he's back then again, more activity.
He doesn't know when to stop. I think at times it's his escape.
Style, lid up.
Turn off your Xbox, please. It's only 5 to 8. Turn it off, please. It's too early.
Okay.
Every morning is the same. It's an incredible amount of energy.
Aaron Egan was diagnosed with ADHD 4 years ago, and as part of his parents' management plan, he follows a strict routine every day.
We have become accustomed to the fact now that we have to lock the door in the morning time, because Aaron would be inclined, if he was up before us, to eat half a box of Weetabix.
For every spoonful of cereal he was taking a spoonful of sugar. He doesn't think, he acts first.
That is part of the ADHD, act first, think later.
Aaron is impulsive, and this is the biggest source of conflict for the family.
With the ADHD, he doesn't see my point of view, and he'd fight me 90% of the time. An easy thing from brushing your teeth to a full-blown argument. He has stood up to me. He even told me one day that I won't be always bigger than him.
I feel like different. So I get really angry and stuff and shout. And then after that, I just say to myself, like, why did I do it? Like, why did I start getting angry for, like, a little problem that happened?
That's his first day in secondary school. Aaron was seen to in school. He said it was behavioural problems. We done the whole naughty stepping, and that just didn't work back then either, because he couldn't sit still.
So we were put onto a waiting list for a child and adolescent psychologist, and from the time of putting the letter in to the time he was assessed was 5 years.
The HSC eventually diagnosed Aaron with ADHD. He's missed out on a lot. It could be down to me believing he had behavioural problems. If he had been diagnosed at an earlier age, I could have avoided giving out to him. I could have avoided stopping him from going out playing with his friends or sending him to his room, because he was doing what he thought was normal. It wasn't really, he wasn't being bold. He was just living his life the way he saw it.
There is a school of thought that seems to pertain, which is that children can be bold, can be very bold, or can have ADHD. And it's almost that ADHD has become a medicalised term for extremely bad behaviour, and it's not.
Boys like Aaron have been presenting with symptoms of ADHD since the early days of child psychiatry.
We think children are born with ADHD. We know this was described over 100 years ago, but it wasn't obviously called ADHD. It's characterised by three things: hyperactivity, inattentiveness, and impulsivity. First of all, there are many children who do very well with ADHD on relatively light touch involvement. However, there's a significant number, and particularly those who have marked behavioural difficulties, who seem to be falling through the cracks and who we don't have the resources to meet the needs which they present with. That creates huge suffering for the young people, but in particular for their families, who have a dreadful time trying to deal with it.
This clinic in West Dublin forms part of the HSE's service for children with ADHD.
It is the number one reason for children being referred to child and adolescent mental health services. If you look at within the group of 5 to 9-year-olds, for example, attending child and adolescent mental health services, 50% of the boys who are attending the services suffer from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Specialist mental health services are part of a range of services that need to be in place, and they're not at a point yet where we can say we have the level of service that we aspire to.
The level of service certainly hasn't met the expectations of many families we contacted. A number say they were reduced to begging for help for their child's symptoms of ADHD. The experiences of families trying to access state support are documented in these testimonies from a survey by Primetime. Over 100 families affected by ADHD took part in our survey last year, and many claim they're being let down by the system across a range of services. The parents spoke time and again about a deep sense of frustration in their efforts to access state support, including the most critical help of all, access to a diagnosis. Of those who managed to access state help, 50% said they spent 3 years trying to get a diagnosis of their child's ADHD.
It's an absolute disgrace. It just doesn't have to be that way. With the right supports in place for people, it's a very treatable condition. And the fact that people can't even get a diagnosis, let alone get access to the supports that they need.
Are you or are you not surprised by the findings of our survey?
The type of issues you have identified are issues that is, in other words, if you look at every clinical team in its work every day, these are the issues. Children who've difficulties, an earlier referral to service would have been key. So we have to look and, in a sense, take on board what the findings of that group were and work to minimising, in other words, that delay.
I think by the time some of these families come to us, they're certainly in pretty poor shape. They've been through a lot. They feel completely alone and unsupported. Personally, as somebody working in the service, I'm appalled that people have to wait 3 years. It's a horrible indictment, and it's dreadful to think that people could be struggling and suffering for so long when, if a diagnosis is made and appropriate interventions take place, it's one of the most treatable conditions we can see.
Like Aaron, John Everett also has symptoms of ADHD, except he is younger and he appears to have greater difficulty controlling his behaviour.
You think butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, like, you know? It's hard when he's so lovable, like, to go from one extreme to the other, you know? Happy, angry, all in 1 second, split second. And where the anger comes from, you don't know. I mean, he's a happy child. This is when it all started with John. He's about 3.5 in this picture here. And every day I brought him over to play school, and within an hour I was asked to come back and collect him. Every single day. He would be kicking chairs, kicking students, hitting the teachers. I couldn't fix him. Nobody could. You know, you think you've done something wrong. You don't know where it comes from. You blame yourself for it, you know. His diagnosis took a long time, 4 years, waiting for him to be diagnosed. And I came to breaking point. I couldn't cope anymore with him. Can you calm down, please? No!
It's not the sort of news Jean and her husband Anthony wanted to hear, but finding out their son had a diagnosis of ADHD meant they could at least get help, which they desperately needed.
I was on antidepressants. I just couldn't cope with him. And it's a terrible thing to say that your own child made you go on them. I just couldn't. I found it very, very hard.
John is now on the drug Concerta, a prescription drug which helps calm him down.
What goes through your head, John, when you get angry?
I think noise. I do. And hitting and punching, what I should not do. Kind of shocks me. And I don't mean hit them and all that.
I was afraid of him that day, though. It's not something you would expect from an 8 or 9-year-old, you know, to come running, charging towards you with a shovel, you know, and intent to hurt you, your own child, your own son especially, like. But he's just he's no control over himself, none at all, you know, like the damage he's done on this door. I mean, it's reinforced glass, so I mean, it's not even something that would shatter so easy. I mean, the force behind him hitting that with a shovel. You know, I was blessed there was a door there. Because I think if he had got through the door, I would have got a good belt. John, get the shoes off. Excuse me. What do you call me? I'm not speaking to you now after calling me that. I don't care. Well, I do care. I'm speaking to you now. I don't want to speak to you anymore.
I don't care.
So. What? You're not going to any. Stay there. Stay there.
Get out.
Stay there. You sit there. What do you say to me?
Don't fucking care. Don't care.
What do you say?
Sorry.
Get up. Calmly. John.
Let me go.
Oh, get up.
What makes you so angry?
ADHD.
ADHD?
Yeah. It makes me shake too.
It makes you shake?
Yeah.
And how are you feeling right now?
Not good. My head's pumping. My head's pumping now. I don't like my head pumping. Because it hurts. It does. Even it hurts my ears.
You happy boy now?
Yeah.
Good boy. What a difference 10 minutes makes, huh? That's not even John in full swing. That's mild for John. You know, and that can happen 4, 5, 6 times a day.
A particular source of anguish for Jean is the refusal of some people to believe in ADHD.
People are very, very ignorant. I find all the people are worse because, I mean, it's not heard of. Obviously, in their day, it was just a bold child. And a lot of people don't understand what it is, ADHD. You know, they just think maybe it's the hyper part of it. They don't really understand then that there's the aggressive part of it too. He's just so lovable. You know, it's why he's forgivable. Because, you know, I mean, he's very, very thoughtful and lovable towards everybody. And everybody says it. You know, he's very angelic looking. And then when you see the other side of it, it's a shock.
The frustrations experienced by John Everett's family are reflected in our survey. 81% of families said they experienced prejudice arising from their child's ADHD. And 84% of families described state services as poor or very poor. However, the HSE has made some inroads with investments in services and buildings, such as this one in Ballyfermot in Dublin.
Last year, 8,000 new cases were seen, and of that number, approximately 70% were seen within 3 months of referral to the service.
I think new cases being seen is a very valid statistic in its own right. But I think what people have to bear in mind is that there's a finite amount of work we can do in each year. Now, if you're spending more of that time seeing new cases and taking them off the waiting list, your waiting list looks more pretty. But clearly you've got less time to spend on the existing cases.
And the waiting times for these so-called existing cases is something of a postal code lottery. In Dublin Mid Leinster, for instance, just 1% of families are waiting more than 12 months for an appointment. But in HSE Region South, it's 21%. And the unluckiest place of all is HSE Region West, where 29% of children are waiting over a year for services.
Do you not accept that there are areas where the service is unbelievably patchy?
We have a situation whereby some parts of the country are better resourced than others, and that in that area where you have less resource, there is less service, a less amount of a service available to that population. Clearly, any future resource needs to be prioritised to those areas, so we do have equity of access across the country.
The HSE says there are plans for 150 new posts for overall child services. But cutbacks will also continue, and there are significant delays elsewhere in services for children with ADHD.
Delays can happen at a variety of different levels. They can happen at the school level, they can happen at primary care level. Sometimes a GP may be reluctant to refer. It can happen at educational psychology. And then when a child is actually referred to a child and adolescent mental health service, there can be a waiting list there as well. So there can be an accumulation of waitings.
Tests for ADHD are carried out at centres like the Lucina Clinic here in Dublin. Professor Fiona McNicholas makes her assessments with the help of parents and teachers who fill in a questionnaire.
The sorts of questions that this would ask the parent to rate would be if the child is constantly moving, easily distracted, frequently inattentive, appears not to listen, disorganised, forgetful, restless, overactive, unable to sit still, impulsive, acting out of turn.
But not everyone is convinced by these symptoms of ADHD. One of the biggest frustrations for families is the view held by some that ADHD is not a genuine disorder and that their children are simply bold.
Oh, bold. We had several teachers in primary school that said he was just bold. And because we hadn't got an official diagnosis, unfortunately the school couldn't do anything to help.
I get it all the time. Yeah. No manners, spoiled. Just a bold child.
But even in the world of psychiatry, there's still a small but vocal minority who do not believe that boys like John Everett have a genuine brain disorder.
One of the leading skeptics is Professor Sami Tamimi, who claims there's still no clinical proof that ADHD exists.
One of the errors that we have made is to think of ADHD as being what is called a neurodevelopmental disorder. That is illegitimate because in clinical practice, actually there's lots of different reasons why people could develop these types of behaviours, which start to go missing when we go down this narrow model.
Right?
While the skeptics may reject the label of ADHD, few can doubt that the symptoms, such as those featured here, are very real, which raises an obvious question for the skeptics.
This is not you being like this, Nick.
What do we do in its place? These issues are real. This hyperactivity really does exist.
If we got rid of these labels, then mental health services would be much more open to listening to the diverse stories that people bring. I don't think ADHD can be thought of as a legitimate condition of the brain. We just don't have the evidence to support that. Show me somebody who's had their diagnosis of ADHD supported by some sort of brain scan, and you won't be able to show me anybody.
But brain scan evidence may be on the way. And scientists believe they may be on the brink of proving the skeptics wrong. The study is based in Trinity College and is being led by this man, German-born Professor Thomas Frodel.
This is one of the biggest studies of its kind where we look into the brain to see the brain function and brain structure. And we already see some evidence that there are changes in the brain of people with ADHD. We can see the changes in the brain.
The researchers are observing these differences in brain scans taken from 80 people who have symptoms of ADHD.
Here we're looking at an image from a group of adult participants who were diagnosed with ADHD in childhood, and we're following them up now to see how their brain has evolved, how the structure is compared to those who don't have ADHD. So we're already seeing that even at the most basic resting state level, that there is reduced activity in core regions of the brain which coincide with the symptoms of ADHD, which involve emotional problems, attention problems, the key things that could impact your education, your job prospects, your relationship prospects, your social prospects. It's a massive impairment. So this is really exciting that we're finding a biological basis for this disease. So hopefully it will help to banish any scepticism out there.
There's overwhelming scientific evidence that ADHD exists. Parents are telling us all the time that they feel that they have to justify that the child has ADHD and that it's a condition and it's not just naughtiness. Other neurobiological conditions such as autism, people don't disbelieve their existence, yet ADHD, people just don't believe that it's a condition.
Perhaps the biggest controversy around ADHD is not so much about whether it exists or not, but how it is treated. These are some of the most effective treatments, Ritalin and Concerta, prescription drugs which can help kids concentrate, but can also, in a minority of cases, have potential side effects. The health warning here for Concerta is quite explicit. It refers to slowing of growth, decreased appetite, headaches, nervousness, anxiety, and one of the most common side effects, not being able to sleep. Yet these drugs can be highly effective, and we found this presented a serious dilemma for many parents we met as they tried to find the best treatment for a child who's out of control. Rebecca Redmond has experienced some of the more serious side effects of medication, but without these prescription drugs, she usually ends up in trouble.
In school on Friday, I got sent to time out 5 times. I wasn't listening to the teacher because I didn't have my tablet.
You didn't have your tablet?
No, so it made me very, very bored. No!
Rebecca's temper tantrums can be explosive, and her mum Irene is among those who felt the brunt of her 10-year-old's tantrums.
It's just when sometimes when I get really angry, I just box my mommy. And she has to hold me in timeout. I try boxing her. I kick and all. And she has to hold me. She has to hold me to timeout.
Irene says she spent 3 years trying to find out the source of Rebecca's hyperactivity and impulsiveness, and it came as a shock when she found the only solution for her daughter was medication.
In the past, Rebecca has been extremely violent on a number of occasions, but her mum Irene says there was a sudden and dramatic reoccurrence of these kind of feelings when she went on Ritalin back in May. This letter was written by Rebecca within days of going on Ritalin earlier this year, when she became quite delusional and feared her mum was going to attack her with a knife.
I know you hate me. Just say it. I know you want to kill me. I know being born was a mistake. I wish I was dead. Everyone hates me.
I was very sad at that time, so I wrote that. But I didn't mean it though. I was very angry.
It's okay, Rebecca. You don't have to cry anymore because it's good now, isn't it? Those thoughts are gone.
I was actually crying when I wrote that part.
A new safety warning about these types of side effects was recommended by the EU's Medicines Agency 3 years ago. The agency found that in very rare cases, Ritalin could cause or worsen psychiatric behaviours such as psychosis and thoughts of suicide. The new warning sheet ordered by the EU had already been introduced for similar brands of Ritalin, but not the 10mg tablets prescribed to Rebecca when she received them back in May. This is the leaflet Rebecca would have got with other brands of the same drug.
The chances of all of them happening in one go is very rare. They say possible side effects, seeing, feeling or hearing things that are not real. Again, she definitely 100% fell into those. It says here, thinking about or feeling like killing herself. She had spoke about taking the knife and killing herself and asking me which knife would kill her quicker.
Novartis, the makers of Ritalin, told Prime Time that the new health warning has since been introduced for all new batches of the Ritalin brand. The warning points out that Ritalin can worsen previous psychiatric behaviours, such as those previously experienced by Rebecca. It says the type of side effects reported by Rebecca affect between 1 in 100 and 1 in 1,000 people. Rebecca has since switched to a different medication and is no longer experiencing the same delusions as before, although she now has to take additional medication to help her sleep.
No parent wants to put their child on medication, even though it's for her and it has helped tremendously. It's still not a nice decision to have to make for any of you.